Welcome back to Life Sculptors Podcast, where we help your life take shape. I'm your host, Dante Poole, and it is always a pleasure to be with you, to engage in conversation with you. And I'm just telling you, I'm delighted to share today's read. Oh, man, just so many good nuggets. And I'm telling you, if it's not helping anybody else, it helps me to have these conversations. So much good is here. Thank you again for liking, for sharing, for commenting, for subscribing, for all of the things that you're doing to not just engage the conversation with me, but the way as I'm learning that you're engaging conversation with each other. It's just great. It's just great. And so thank you for that. Today, we are reading a story called After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again. Oh, man. There's a quote that I heard recently. It says that history is a teacher, not a blueprint. Yeah, I know, right off the bat, right? History is a teacher, not a blueprint. And so as I think about Humpty Dumpty, it raises some questions for me. Like, what was the cause of the Great Fall? Why was he on the wall to begin with? What kind of egg was Humpty Dumpty? I know. Questions, right? Questions. And I typically don't start here, but I want to start by reading a part of the inside cover of the book. Again, it's After the Fall. The author is Dan Santat. Dan Santat. Oh, man. Okay, here it goes. The inside cover reads, "My name is Humpty Dumpty, and I'm famous for falling off a wall. You may have heard about it. But that's only half the story, because I decided to get back up, and when I did, something amazing happened. This story is about my life after the fall." So this is an epilogue, and it just means that an epilogue is a narrative that's given within the story, but the purpose of it is to bring closure to the story. So let's see what we get from Humpty. There may be some portions of the book where I stop and point out some things that you can't see because it's on the page and it gives context to it. So here we go. After the fall. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot on the wall, high up on the wall. I know it's an odd place for an egg to be, but I love being close to the birds. Then one day I fell. I'm sort of famous for that part. Folks called it the Great Fall, which sounds a little grand. It was just an accident, but it changed my life. Fortunately, all the king's men managed to put me back together. Well, most of me. There were some parts that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. And after that day, I became afraid of heights. I was so scared that it kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. I'd walk past the wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I really missed the birds and being high above the city, but I could never do it because I knew that accidents can happen. Eventually, I settled for watching the birds from the ground. It wasn't the same, but it was better than nothing. Then one day, an idea flew by. Pause. That idea was a paper plane. Let's pick it up. Making planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches, but day after day, I kept trying and trying and trying until I got it just right. Y'all, he makes a paper plane that looks like a bird. My plane was perfect, and it flew like nothing could stop it. I hadn't felt that happy in a long time. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was close enough. But unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. His plane flies to the top of the wall. I almost walked away again. But then I thought about all the time I'd spent working on my plane and all the things I'd missed. I decided I was going to climb that wall. But the higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it. I was terrified. I didn't look up and I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. Maybe now you wouldn't think of me as the egg who was famous for falling. Hopefully, you remember me as the egg who got back up. Now, I have to show you this. There's a picture of Humpty, and there are actually feathers coming out of his cracked shell. So hopefully you'll remember me as the egg who got back up again. And learned how to fly. The end. Life begins when you get back up again. Y'all. Let's talk for a moment about the origins of Humpty Dumpty, right? Because, if you were like me, I remember this nursery rhyme. And in my research, what I discovered is that this nursery rhyme first came to be known back in as early as 1797. It was made famous by a nursery rhyme collector, an English nursery rhyme collector. His name was J.W. Eliot. And it became popular in the United States as a Broadway musical. It was a pantomime done by George L. Fox on Broadway. 483 performances of Humpty Dumpty from 1868 to 1869. But here's what's most interesting. Here's the original text, the English version. Like when I say English, I mean the European version of Humpty Dumpty. It says, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. What? We are good about Americanizing something, right? And so it became Americanized as Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Now, there's a whole connection to a king and some war and a cannon that was on the wall that was nicknamed Humpty Dumpty and got knocked down and they couldn't put it back in its place again. I'm just telling you, but we have a way, right, of changing Humpty's story. Humpty's story has changed depending on who's telling it. This nursery rhyme, it started out as a riddle, and the answer was an egg, but how did it become that they couldn't put them back together again? I'll tell you how. The book reminds us that we all have a story, and sometimes the details of our story, they get misconstrued depending on who's telling it. It gets misconstrued depending on who's telling it and the motive and agenda behind why they're telling the story. See, there's a story that people tell about us. And then there is the story we tell others about ourselves. But there's also the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And these three are not always the same. See, we have to own our own narratives because what happens is some important information about our story gets lost in translation and communication. Like, what's important to note here is that my man Humpty did manage to get put back together again. But did he get back to where he was before? Hmm. Like, what has happened to you as a result of your mistakes? As a result of some action or some accident or something that has happened in your life? Like, are you back to where you were before the mishap, before the misstep, before the accident, before the incident, before the mistake? Like, what has kept you from recovering from the decisions of your past or the effects of the decisions of others on your life? Just because you fell off the wall doesn't mean you didn't belong there. Maybe Humpty's fall was necessary so that he could get incubated for his purpose. What are you talking about, man? What? It could be. It could be that we wanted to fly. We wanted to become something before that part of us was ready, was developed. And sometimes what happens is we let others convince us that we were ready before our time. If you try to go fast to get to your dreams, you will always arrive prematurely and with some parts of you underdeveloped. So don't be so anxious to get to the place you dream that you short circuit your ability to thrive there because you didn't endure the process. See, incubation is necessary. It's a necessary phase of becoming and needs a favorable environment and conditions for the egg to become more than just a meal. Yeah, an egg has to be formed and then it develops and then it hatches. And like us, our dreams and who we are, we must be formed and developed before we can hatch. The truth is, we all started out as an egg. Yeah, we did. And we were fertilized, and then we were formed in our mother's wombs, and we were birthed into an environment that began the incubation process. And that incubation process influenced who we have become, our identity. See, Humpty's fall was necessary so that he could discover that the shell he was in was limiting him. Like the shell was not his identity. It was just a temporary place. It was the environment needed in order for him to become. You do realize that your environment is not your identity. See, he had to learn to make space for who he was becoming and not just who he was at the moment. Have you made space for your becoming? Like, are you making room for your own development or have you just settled for the shell of yourself? What if the mistake happened so that you could see that you were made for more than just being an observer of everyone else's successes? Maybe you were even in the right environment, but you had the wrong mindset. See the limits that we set on our lives, have to do with our identity. And I heard this recently, and it was like, yes. You know how you hear something and you just like, you just agree with it? It says, my identity regulates my expectations. Yeah. How often do we over-identify with our mistakes and our accidents and our incidents and our challenges? Our internal dialogue is so important because it helps us and informs the way we show up in life. Our words shape our lives. Our thoughts count as words. Because your greatest muscle is your mind. And our identity, it's housed in our mind. I was doing a little look in here, and according to some psychologists, they say that our identity can be defined by certain elements. It's our strengths and abilities. It's our personal goals and dreams and desires for our life. It's made up of our memories, of knowledge and experiences and perspectives and beliefs and values. And these are the things which inform the story that we tell about ourselves. And remember, right? It's the story other people tell about you. It's the story you tell other people about you, which isn't always the truth. And it's the story you're telling yourself, which too sometimes is not always the truth. So our sense of self is built on the foundation of what's happening in our past, but it is transformed by our present and our future. We are ever becoming. Sometimes I'm becoming a better version of myself, and sometimes I'm becoming a lesser version than I'm intended to live. See, when we focus on our strengths, then it serves us well to understand our identity. Like there's the algorithm of our lives that has us so conditioned that we focus on negatives and weaknesses, and we often misuse them to understand our identity. Like, don't use your weaknesses to help inform your identity. As a matter of fact, if you want to try to understand yourself a little more, you want to understand even just your strengths, because sometimes we have a hard time identifying them. How about you start asking your friends or your families or your coworkers or your neighbors or the server at the coffee shop that you visit every day and have a dialogue with? And another place that we could utilize to help us find our identity is to be able to focus on where you find meaning and purpose. And it's usually nestled in what makes you feel most alive. Like it's the thing that energizes you or is the most peaceful or the most motivating, the thing that makes you feel connected and excited. Because research says that having a sense of purpose brings tremendous benefits to life. Sometimes you might have to work with a therapist to try to understand your identity. Yep. It's like excavating something, right? It's buried treasure is what I call it. And you need help unearthing who you are. So mistakes happen, but we become what we say about ourselves as a result of it. I'll say it again for the people in the back there. Mistakes happen, but we become what we say about ourselves as a result of those mistakes. And so just because you're known for something, that doesn't make it your identity, because you could be living a lie. A lot of us are wearing masks, perpetrating the fraud. And so people are good, too, at creating drama and entertainment out of your mistakes. Like I would say this when I worked as a principal, I would say this to kids all the time, like, don't have fun at the expense of someone else. In our previous episode on compassion, we talked about how gossip is an issue of our own lameness because we're having fun or being entertained at the expense of someone else's pain. Challenges change us, but we get to determine how it changes us. And so the great fall broke Humpty's shell, but it didn't break his purpose. It didn't break his potential, but it did bruise his passion. And so we're so quick, right? That when someone is hurting and when we see them broken, we want to rush in and rescue. We're so quick to rescue someone who seems to be struggling. And often the struggle and the pain that makes us feel more uncomfortable and we feel more uncomfortable than the pain that they're really in. And so that's what really drives our efforts. We're really not trying to help them feel better. We really are trying to help ourselves feel better. And so we put bandages and glue on things because it makes us feel better so we can say, look what I did. Sometimes the help you think someone needs isn't really the help they need. Like what you think might be helpful really isn't helpful. And this is why people will reject your version of help if it's not meeting their needs. And it's because we didn't take the time to try to understand someone. We didn't take the time to try to understand what was really going on there and what they really needed. We didn't take the time to assess whether or not what we were offering was going to be helpful. And sometimes we just needed to ask them if this thing would be helpful. The other side of this is that we're all broken. And so I'm not saying that the broken people can't help people. But what I'm saying is it's when you can't or you won't or you don't see your own brokenness that you are less likely to be helpful to others. Humpty says it this way: there were some parts that couldn't be healed by bandages and glue. Yeah, see, after our own falls, we can end up as fragmented versions of ourselves. We remember how we used to be and sometimes lose sight of who we were supposed to be. See, our falls can cause us to surrender our dreams and not go after the things that were interesting to us or that we even enjoyed. And the wrong perspective about our falls can keep us from enjoying even our favorite things. We not only avoid them, but we also avoid taking risk. We play it safe. We stay away from anything that's connected to our incident or that has the potential for another accident. We eventually settle for a life with fewer risk because it's easier to play it safe than it is to take the leap. We'd rather watch our dreams from afar than risk getting close to failure again. I will tell you, though, this is what's incredible about life. Our passions and our potential and our purpose, they never stop pursuing us. Man, it's why you can't seem to let them go. Like, you can't let that thing go. You continue to have the one day I'm going to. You see, these things, they ignite in us. They often even reignite in us a desire to do more than just settle. Can I tell you, your dreams deserve more than just good enough. And we can't live our lives avoiding mistakes and accidents. We can't live that way. And so what looks like an accident may just be your potential calling you back to the wall. Yeah, just because you're scared doesn't mean that you shouldn't. And it doesn't mean that you can't. Keep going even if you're afraid. As a matter of fact, like Humpty, he just kept going until he wasn't afraid anymore. Keep going until you're not afraid anymore. I dare you to keep going until you're not afraid anymore. And just one more. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. Because you're in charge of your happiness. You're in charge of whether or not you're going to pursue the things that bring joy to your life. See, it's when we push past our fears and one step at a time that we begin to embrace our hopes and dreams and we begin to discover or unleash the person inside of us who has been waiting and longing for the freedom to become. Here's my hope. My hope is that Humpty's epilogue and this conversation, that it helps you to bring closure to some of the mistakes that you've had in your life. Like, I dare you to surprise yourself and others by doing something that you've been dreaming of. Like the one that no one thought you'd ever do. I love this epilogue. I love that Humpty cracked his shell, spread his wings, and flew. Why not spread your wings and fly? And all this time, we thought Humpty Dumpty was a chicken egg. Chickens don't fly, y'all. Don't be a chicken. Don't be a chicken. You can bounce back from your mistakes. And don't make your mistakes your identity. All right, that's all I got. Hey, remember, you're enough. Like, for real, you're enough. Thank you for listening and for sharing, for liking, for commenting. Thank you for all of that. I'm Dante Poole. This is Life Sculptors. I'll see you later.